And we are live. We have been so for the last few seconds. I hope you beachies are ready because it's time for another fabulous Free Friday over on the Beach Brothers Show. Let's get ready to have one of our classic Beach Brothers Show intros and just right about now.
So look, the Beach Brothers Show is a show where we deal with Virginia business and politics.
Well, I'm Conrad Chesviner. I'm a Hampton Roads political activist. Best ideas for community improvement happen to drive me.
I help folks that are approaching retirement and in their retirement years.
I have what I call the empowerment agenda. And that means that everything I do is focused on empowerment. You want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seiko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show.
Well, tonight's going to be a cool one, and I'm glad we have on the guest that we do today. Now, before I head over and do my podium, I'll remind you all that quality cars you can get over at Southern Volkswagen. Southern Volkswagen's over at 1248 South Military Highway over in Chesapeake. So stop in soon, go see Charlie Roy, and you'll be closer to a car that's of quality, and you can drive all over this great 757. So go see Charlie Roy this week. Now on to the podium. A friend of mine, Charlotte Job, spoke to the Chesapeake School Board recently in advance of the school board's positions on accepting Virginia's transgender accommodations. Chesapeake would skip right past that vote, by the way, not even bringing it up to a vote to follow the state guidelines. Personally, I would say that's rather cowardly, but Charlotte's points deserve more light. Charlotte was concerned about the safety of children and noted that suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people. And among transgender youth, 52% have considered suicide seriously. That level drops by half when those youth have support at home and among friends. That falls close to in line with non-transgender youth who aren't disrespected for who they are. The greater point being, don't otherwise transgender people. Don't try to manufacture a means to dislike and negatively legislate away transgender individuals due to your own comfortability. Comfortability is the point of opposition to this accommodation policy. It isn't socially acceptable to be anti-LGBTQ, but you can manifest your displeasure at LGBTQ by opposing accommodation bills through false prisms. Relative to non-transgender youth, transgender youth are more likely to be truant from school, experience victimization and bias-based bullying, and they represent and report more negative perceptions of school climate. And there is still opposition to bills like this on the fear of a transgender youth themselves. David Wilson, a Republican candidate in Newport News for the State House, he's taking this decision quite emotionally and even trying to say he has lawyers ready to go if any transgender students do anything to your children. I saw another comment feed saying, who was out to protect non-trans students? And they emphasized non. She stated she had a problem with her daughters using the same restroom as boys. That comment betrays any belief in the acceptance of transgendered individuals by denying them their self-identity. Also, I have noticed, because this came up in a Virginia Beach meeting too, and there were long public comments on that all the strong opinions on this are about students identifying as female whom they believe are male. Like that woman just before who said that they had a problem with boys being in the restroom as her daughters, And the commentators across Hampton Roads paint the picture of abusive males inside female bathrooms. They do not take the time to worry about transgender students transitioning or transition from female to male, who then would go to male bathrooms. See, in that moment, they didn't think men and boys had anything to worry about and stopped worrying about the person they just deemed still a woman having to be around all those boys and men. So even in a battle of transgender rights, they focus their anger and misdirection away from where it should go, and that's toxic masculinity. So don't be misled down the road to hate, folks, and that's my podium for tonight. So let's join me tonight on the road to coolness. Tonight's guest is from Newport News. He's a city councilman. He's David Jenkins. Let me go ahead and bring him on right now as I finish my intro of Mr. David Jenkins. He studied government at William & Mary, becoming an officer in the U.S. Medical Service Corps. He worked in planning and training in field environment, lived in West Germany for 5 years, served in the Middle East during Desert Storm, left the Army, lived in Texas, and even went broke. He knows the struggle of trying to find good jobs and worked in housing, affordable housing, for 16 years. He returned to Newport News 8 years ago, and we get the pleasure of interviewing him today. So, Councilman, how the heck are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. I had a nice work over at the beach, and now I'm enjoying this great, though hot afternoon. So I'm glad that you were able to join us today. So let's start with you. Fill in any gaps about your story, your uniqueness, and your experiences that I might have left out just now.
Well, my great-grandfather was one of the first people to live in kind of the modern city of Newport News. He came to the city around 1882 and opened a grocery store. And my grandmother lived with us when I was a child, and I often heard stories about how back in the day, everybody in town knew our family, and stories of old Newport News. And when I was growing up, my dad had retired from the Air Force and went to work for the city treasurer's office as the deputy city treasurer. So as a child, I remember hearing lots of inside stories about Newport News politics back in the day. And it was always assumed that I would follow some sort of political route in life. And I got to William & Mary, and I was studying government and kind of on that track, and got to meet a lot of people in my class who purely wanted political office just to have political office. And they had their entire lives planned out for them. And I chose a different route. I chose to go into the military and serve my country there. And had planned to make the military a career. I really enjoyed it. I worked with lots of great people and got to do a lot of exciting things, and ended up getting out after Desert Storm. And that was quite a new experience for me. I had to learn about the workplace and business and economics kind of on my own in a small Texas town that had their major employer as the federal government, and during a hiring freeze, and with many of the businesses still suffering after Desert Storm. So I got to do some interesting things. I got to sell insurance door to door for a little while, and then finally took a job in Dallas and worked for a major international career consulting firm as their director of corporate research. And that really wasn't working too well for me. My wife was still in the military down at Fort Hood, so we couldn't live together. We had to live apart, and she had just come back from the Gulf herself. She was also a medical service corps officer. And so it was a lot of hard times, and went with a startup company, and that didn't work. But finally made it my way back home and was able to live with my wife, and took a job in manufacturing. I worked for Texas Instruments, and got to see kind of a part of the economy a lot of people don't see. I'm walking in, I have a degree from William & Mary. I have, 8.5 years of solid management experience. And the job that they put me on was putting made in the USA labels on circuit boards. which wasn't a really good use of my skills, I would think. But, to my credit, I worked hard and eventually became in charge of one of their 3 production lines. But left because they were still paying me what they paid me to put Made in the USA labels on circuit boards. And that didn't seem to be right to me at the time. So did a few things in politics and actually ended up running for office and failed miserably. My wife said we would never do that again. And then after that experience, was a nighttime manager at a radio station for a few months. And again, great job. I loved what I was doing, but I wasn't making enough money to make ends meet. And then went and worked at a couple of other jobs. And then finally got into manufactured modular home sales and had a great 16-year career in a profession that has about a 200% turnover rate every year. And so I kind of earned my stripes there. I was a housing consultant, salesman, and a sales manager and operations manager and a general manager. And what those experiences did for me were some really amazing things. First of all, when you're used to being the commanding officer in the military, or you're used to being a manager somewhere, you're used to saying things and having people kind of instantly agree with you. And when you're working with the public on a day-to-day basis, you have to learn to work with people and convince them of your ideas and not just assume that they're going to go along. And it gave me a wonderful experience of meeting a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. I worked with people who were struggling to make ends meet, who were not really in a position to own a home. And I had to treat them with dignity and with compassion. And at the same time, I met people who could write a check for anything we built. And so it gave me some experience of working with that background and really some unique insights into what's going on in our economy right now. The days where people worked at one job their entire life just about disappeared. Newport News may be an exception to that with the shipyard, but throughout most of America, people are changing jobs pretty frequently, and they have to be constantly updating their skills and finding what they're looking for. And it's really difficult for a lot of families. You don't see that when you're looking around your neighborhood and you see people driving fancy cars and you see people wearing nice clothes and they seem to be making it. And a lot of people look at them and they go, well, why are they doing so well and I'm not? Well, I was the guy who got to pull their credit report and talk to them about what they made. And a lot of those folks aren't making it either. They just look like it. And we really do need to work on our economy to rebuild our middle class and to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to succeed. I was incredibly happy in Texas. Really, my wife and I had settled down there. She worked for Allergan as a senior biomedical lab technician, and I was working in manufactured housing. But about 8 years ago, my mom was having some problems back here in Newport News. I came back for a couple weeks thinking it would be something minor, but actually she was beginning to have some serious medical problems. And so we got her the help she needed. But then going back to Texas and talking to my wife, we agreed that we really needed to be in Newport News. And we're really glad that we did. She was with us until January of this year. And it's really good to be home, to go back to many of the places that I knew as a child and when I was growing up. And it's amazing how many people remember me when I've gone out and walked neighborhoods. When I was running for office, I'd knock on a door and it would be somebody that I hadn't seen since elementary school. And they were like, oh, that's so great. You're running for office. We kind of always thought you would. And I've really enjoyed local government. This was not something I planned on doing, but it's very different this time when I ran for office versus the first time. The first time I ran in my 30s, I had a good background, thought I knew what I was doing, and decided to run for Congress, actually. Of course, why not? Why not run in 11 counties and make it really hard and make it really expensive? But I had a lot of boldness. And when I came into politics this time, it was with a great deal of humility. I came in actually getting politically involved, just helping other people. I knocked on thousands of doors, supporting candidates running for office, got to know them, ran in the Democratic caucus for the House of Delegates to be the Democratic candidate when the person I was supporting dropped out and didn't make it. And, I remember coming back and thinking, well, you did your best. And I guess they just don't want you in politics. And could have gone that route and just really kind of curled up in a little ball somewhere. And instead, a lot of friends encouraged me to run for city council. And I didn't think I would make it. I was somewhat hesitant about it. And I really didn't know if I had anything that I could offer Newport News. And the more people I talked to, the more I realized that I did have something to offer and that I could make a difference. And the way I won election was just walking in neighborhoods, talking to people, and being out and meeting people wherever I could and listening to them. And I learned a lot by that experience. You really can't replace talking to people one-on-one and having honest conversations. And so that's what got me into office.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, it sounds like that is what helped tell us about what intrigued you about politics. And apparently other people sort of noticed that you were intrigued as well. So that's pretty cool to see that they caught on that you might do this one day. But regarding Newport News City, I want to break down sort of your vision for Newport News piece by piece on some topics. I want you to tell me what you have done about them so far and what you still wish to do. So are you ready for that?
Sure.
All right, let's go with the first one. That'll be public parks. What's your stance on that?
I believe in public parks. In fact, when I ran for office, the first position on all of my literature was keeping Riverview Farm Park a park for the people. Part of that facility had been used by the police to train police dogs, and that facility was closing down. And there was a lot of talk about bringing in high-end homes because that piece of Riverview Farm Park was right on the James River. There was a lot of talk about what great revenue that could bring into our city. But our city, from its very start, made a commitment to public access to the waterways around our city. And we needed that access in northern Newport News, especially since that's where a lot of our population has grown. And I was very pleased that we were able to get the understudy designation taken off of that. Then the next step was working with HRSD. They wanted to expand their facility, which is also there at Riverview Farm Park. And they wanted to do a really great thing. They wanted to purify wastewater in Newport News, pump it back into the aquifer to keep land from settling and to ensure that the peninsula had a clean supply of drinking water for the next decades, if not centuries to come. And through negotiations with HRSD, we were able to have them put in a lot of the improvements for a park, or at least negotiate those. They have yet to be done, but they were able to absorb the cost, so we weren't required to go back to the taxpayers and request that they pay for a park, but we're going to end up getting a park. And the trails that we have designated will anchor that piece of property that was in question as public use property for years to come in our city.
All right, now here's an interesting topic. Community policing. What's your stance and what have you done on that so far?
Well, one of the main bones of contention between me and my nearest competitor when I ran for office was on the stance of policing. And my nearest competitor did not believe in community policing. They believed in the task force system. I read extensively on this and I disagreed. I believe that the best way of policing a community is for the police to be out in that community, to know the people there, and to build trust by the things that they do in the community and the people they know. It makes the community more willing to come and report things to the police rather than feeling like they have to handle it on their own or tolerate crime in their community. And I was very fortunate. I did not have anything to do with hiring Chief Drew. That was the city manager's decision, but I was very pleased that he takes that same stand. I have met with him numerous times. I've had him meet different people in the community that were having problems and having concerns about police. And he has been overwhelmingly supportive of getting the police involved in communities and showing their presence there and building that trust, which I think is the basis of good police work.
Interesting. How about this? Small business incubation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, one of the big differences between living in Texas and living in Newport News that I've seen is that there's a lot more of an entrepreneurial spirit in Texas than there is in Newport News. And I think that means that a lot of our citizens lose out on opportunities. A few years ago at the National League of Cities conference out in Los Angeles, I was able to tour one of their small business incubators and talk to people in the city about that experience. And just recently, a few months ago, we were able to open our own small business incubator, 25 and J, downtown. I was amazed that when we cut the ribbon for the offices, they had rented every office except for one and very shortly rented that additional office. So maybe we are building more of an entrepreneurial spirit in Newport News. I would like to see that. You know, the small businessman that starts their company today could very easily be the next Drucker and Falk. It could be the next Google. It could be the next Amazon. You just never know. And when we can start small businesses like that in our community, I think it pays big dividends for years to come.
This will be another one of those moments where I want to toot my own horn here, but I also ran for city council. And when I ran for city council, one of the main things I was wanting to do was expand rapid bus transit to Virginia Beach. So give us a minute to talk about public transit and your view on that.
Well, you know, since getting elected, I've heard a lot of comments about the public transportation system here in Newport News. We are, of course, part of a regional transportation system, and I don't serve on that board. And for a long time, I was depending on that board to kind of bring back the best information and figure out what needed to be done. And earlier this year, I was thinking about just bus transit in general, and I realized that, you know, the way it's always been done is not necessarily the best way for it to be done. And an awful lot of our people here in Newport News and throughout the region are food insecure. They're struggling. They have been for a long time. And they're the same people that ride the bus. So I looked into it, and about 85% of the costs of the mass transit system we have in this region are paid for by federal, state, and city tax dollars. So that leaves a very small portion that's actually paid by the ridership of mass transit. So looking at the city budget in Newport News, I believe that our operating budget would allow us to put in money to replace fares to where we could make the system free. I think that would help our businesses because it would allow people to get jobs more easily. It would stimulate the economy because a lot of the people who ride the buses would spend their savings in the local economy, improving their lives, and that would create businesses and jobs. And I think that the buses would run more efficiently because you wouldn't have the delays of people paying for fares. And it would also cut down on pollution in our area. It would cut down on the wear and tear of our roads, the more people that ride mass transit, and it would cut down on the traffic for people who choose to drive by car. So I see a lot of really good things going on with public transportation, and I would like to get as many people riding on the system as possible. Now, of course, one of the trade-offs on that is that I hear from a lot of people that they want to expand the system as well, and they're somewhat concerned that if we made the buses free, then that would take away money from the possible expansion of the service. And having given a lot of thought to that, I guess the best example that I could come up with is that, if we increase the demand for public services in the form of mass transit, then I think there'll be a natural pressure to expand the routes that's just not there right now. A business example might be, I've known several restaurant owners who, when their restaurant was really busy, they found a way to expand that restaurant to accommodate the need. And that seemed like a natural thing to do. Right now, we have the equivalent of a restaurant that's really not full that's talking about expanding. And I think it's very difficult to get the public behind investing a lot of money in expanding routes when they see the current routes being underutilized.
All righty. So green energy, that's something that could be new and improving down the decades line here in Hampton Road. So what are your thoughts about how Newport News and yourself could help jumpstart that?
Well, one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is that one of the first things that I did when I joined the Newport News City Council was getting a resolution through the council supporting green energy in the form of the wind turbines that are coming to Virginia. I thought it was very important for us to go on the record as supporting wind because it's clean energy, but also that particular industry has a huge opportunity here in the Hampton Roads area. We could very well become the national, or at least the East Coast base for that industry with the high-tech workforce that we have and the heavy design and engineering people that we have with our natural maritime industry. And so I thought it as really being a win-win sort of situation. I also have supported the programs that the schools are doing, converting a lot of their schools to solar power. We recently got a couple of schools approved to put solar panels on the ground. That's been a problem with our city council. Basically, right now, the school board can put solar panels on any school that they have in their inventory, as long as those panels go on the roof. And there are some schools that the roof just won't accommodate solar panels. It's not a matter of the age of the roof necessarily. It's a matter of the roof design or the alignment of the school. So the school board looked at a few locations where they agreed that it was a good idea to put solar panels on the ground. That significantly increased the cost to Tribe Solar, who was doing the project, but Tribe Solar also agreed that this was the right thing to do. And the only reason it came to City Council was that because it was on the ground, it was considered to be a power station, much as you would have a power station generated by natural gas or by nuclear power or by coal. I have expressed my concern several times that ordinance really should not apply to solar because it's inherently a very different sort of power that's being generated. Earlier this year, we were not able to get a consensus to approve some of the solar panels, but that was reversed in a couple of schools this year. And I'm hoping that if we continue to work together, we'll continue to put solar wherever we can. I was also very pleased that the city of Newport News accommodated Tesla. We had some disagreements with them. There were some unique interpretations among city officials as far as what Tesla would have to do to provide high-speed charging stations in Newport News, some unique interpretations of state guidelines, and we were able to work with city officials and overcome those obstacles. And we now have the high-speed charging stations at the Patrick Henry Mall.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yep.
Now, you've mentioned already your work in housing, affordable housing. So what is your vision on improving that in the area?
Well, Newport News was extremely fortunate. We've got lots of good people working for us, and we were able to go back into the federal government, reapply for the Choice Housing Initiative grant. I was frankly surprised that we got it on our second attempt. Again, when I was out in Los Angeles, I visited the Watts neighborhood. They had applied for a similar grant a couple times and had been turned down. So it really says a lot about the employees of Newport News that they were able to put together a good grant proposal and get it approved. And it says a lot about our community coming together to support affordable housing in the Southeast community. So we've got some exciting things going on there, replacing some of the older public housing stock that we have and hopefully improving some lives there. But one of the other things that I have been pressing for over the last few years is the coming up with a plan that will allow the city to allow housing on some of our smaller lots downtown. A lot of those lots were put in at a time when smaller homes were being built, when 25-foot lots were acceptable. And that's kind of what we're stuck with right now. And the city has in the past been trying to promote 50-foot lots. Well, that sounds really good, and it's nice to have bigger homes and it's nice to have bigger lots, but you have some property owners that have just a 25-foot lot. And you have some people who are trying to get entry-level housing, and really that's all they can afford. And you also have some other restrictions that the city had put on building on those lots that added to the cost of the homes, which priced some people out of the market. And it's the same situation I ran into when I was working with affordable housing. It's a common thing that a lot of cities do. I don't think anybody here was thinking in malicious terms about it. But when you put too many restrictions on a piece of property, it basically makes that property worthless to the owner, and it discourages investment, and it prevents people who otherwise might be able to own their own home from doing it. And so about a year and a half ago, we had a briefing from housing, and they very patiently explained to me that what I was proposing was just pretty much impossible, that it was never going to happen. And I kept pushing for this idea. And we just, in our last work session, had another briefing that showed that they have come up with some ideas to be able to put in affordable housing. And I think that's very important, particularly for our Southeast community. The way that I've seen development done is that when you have an area where people are moving into that area, they're buying homes, there's economic interest in that area, that draws in jobs, it draws in retail operations and support services that surround that community. Years ago, when I was living in San Antonio, there was a developer there, Ray Ellison, and he was a guy who was an E6 in the Army and got out and built his first home and did pretty well at it, because by the time I was in San Antonio, he was building over 50% of the new single-family homes in the city. And what he did was he would buy land outside the city, he would put in his housing development, and then he would reserve land along major roads, and then he would sell that to retail. And with the houses there was a demand for retail in those areas. So I think that housing in a lot of ways drives retail. And in the city of Newport News, what we've often tried to do is lure retail into areas that retailers just don't see as being profitable to them. And I think if we can show real retailers that there's money to be made. We're going to not have to worry so much about planning what goes into that area. You're going to have a line of people who want to move into that community and provide wraparound services for the people who live there.
The sort of last little topic here I have a little lined up is very broad, but it's important. So social justice for marginalized communities. What would be your thoughts on that as a councilman?
Social justice covers a broad range of topics. I think that we need to be very aware of what's going on with communities in our cities. I visited several times with Dr. Finn, who has studied redlining and studied the marginalization of citizens here. I've done some of my own research in this area as well. And we have to make sure that every part of our city and everyone in our city has the opportunity to live in a great neighborhood, to be able to achieve and follow their dreams, to have access to opportunities, to have the expectation of justice without a fight for it. I was very pleased last year to be walking with the Black Lives Matter movement. I did that several times during the protests. And I have a wide variety of friends across the United States on Facebook, and they were like, "Why are you there? What? Oh, they're criminals. They're terrible people. They're rioting in the streets." But the people I walked with didn't. The people I walked with were people who were looking for social justice. They were looking for inclusion and fairness. And I think that we all have that as something that we want for ourselves and should want for others. And again, one of the things that I was particularly proud of in Newport News is that where you saw so many cities across the country where protesters and police were at odds with each other, in Newport News, we had a number of police officers walk with the protesters because right is right and wrong is wrong. And the police are not here ideally to mistreat people. They're there to enforce the law and do so fairly.
All right. Now, I have my own philosophical proclivities. I'm a member and a regular donor to the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee. I am a member of the Hampton Roads Black Caucus's Community Action Team, striving to lobby for good policy to benefit marginalized communities in Hampton Roads, of course, with the Kenai, Virginia Beach. I helped found and regularly donate to the Virginia Beach Progressive Caucus. But this all comes back to yourself, Councilman Jenkins. What groups, besides council, do you currently help with?
Well, I help with a number of groups. And again, I think that makes me a better council member when I'm out there meeting with various groups. The people that I meet with a lot are, of course, the Democratic City Committee of Newport News. And I've been very pleased to do that and to help them stay in touch with the things going on in our city. I also work with the Sierra Club. My wife is a member of the Master Naturalists, and so she provides me information from their organization. I have supported a number of progressive organizations, Peninsula Indivisible. One of the first groups that I associated with and got to know when I was first entering, before I even got into politics, was Peninsula Voices for Change, which was a progressive group looking at a broad base of issues. But in addition to those, I also go out to the Chamber of Commerce. I also am a member of the American Legion. And I don't like to just listen to one group of people. I like to listen to all and be as helpful as I can. I think that many of the divisions we have among our citizens are, to a certain extent, artificially created by people have learned to profit from them. And when you talk to real people about real problems, you see that we really don't have the strong differences you get sometimes on social media. We all love our kids. We all support our schools. We all want safe neighborhoods. We all want a clean environment. And one of the things that is particularly challenging right now is bringing people together enough to where they can talk about practical solutions to these problems and get beyond some of the partisanship that we've had. Having worked with both parties, I know that there are reasonable people in both parties. And I look forward to working with everyone in our community. And I truly believe that even though I may disagree with you and we may come at issues from different perspectives, you should always feel welcome when you come to the city council or when you talk to your elected representative, that it should be a respectful and polite exchange and disagreements on policy. And you know, I recently was talking to a group of folks and they were very progressive. And I said, you know, in my job, I don't have the luxury of hating people the way that a lot of activists can. I have to make sure that everybody feels welcome and that above all, we're doing the best things for our community and for everyone who lives here.
That sounds exactly right. So aside from all the political, tell us about the appreciation you have for Newport News' daily charm. What's good with Newport News? Everything from business to entertainment, all that. Just tell us about what's good about Newport News.
We've got a lot of great things going on in Newport News. And, you know, one of the pet peeves that I have is people who talk about bad news, Newport News, and want to talk about the problems that we have. And everybody has problems. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I would hate to be judged by the things that I do worse. I would like to be judged by the things that I do best. And we do a lot of things really well here in Newport News. We have some great high-tech jobs. We have some great industries that are coming forward. I'm very excited about JLab being here. You know, we have more nuclear physicists in Newport News than anywhere else in the United States. And a lot of people don't even think of that as being a big deal here. We have Canon here. And, you know, if you watch the Olympics, it was Canon from Newport News that sent out support teams to make sure that photographers all over the world got great shots of the Olympics. Even if something went wrong with their cameras, they were there to provide replacements. They were there to provide repairs. And we have a global reach here in Newport News. One of the things I'm very excited about is our shipyard. And we really don't talk as much as we should about what a great institution that is. They provide some wonderful jobs. You can have a great career in the shipyard. You can do cutting edge technology. And the shipyard in Newport News has its amazing place in history. I never learned this in school. I had to learn it later. But, you know, when we talk about Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet that sailed around the world and created the modern Navy, some of those ships were built right here in Newport News, you know, and the defense posture of the United States and the world being better for that over the 20th century, a lot of that was because of Newport News and the people who live here. And I think that's really exciting. And I'm excited about Christopher Newport University. I am amazed. When I was a kid here, it was a small place and not very impressive. And now it's one of the major universities in the state of Virginia. And I think it's exciting when we have that to offer our local citizens and when we bring in ideas from all across the Commonwealth and other parts of the United States. I've talked to Paul Tribble a few times, and I would like to get students more involved in some of the local issues that we're having and looking at local political matters, not just because I can kind of selfishly use their talent, but hopefully it would inspire them to go to their communities when they complete college and get involved in local affairs and realize what a difference that makes. I'm really glad that we're supporting so much of our history. We recently completed the renovation at the Lee Hall train station, which had been going on for way too long. We have been celebrating our history in a number of ways. There is talk about some historic trails that can be done in downtown Newport News to celebrate the African American experience in Newport News, which again is something that we don't talk about enough. When you think about civil rights, too many people think about the 50s and the 60s, but if you go back 50 years earlier, when we were beginning to go under Jim Crow here in Newport News and in the state of Virginia, you had really remarkable African-American activists fighting that from the very start and fighting for the rights of everyone in the community. And I think that's a part of our history that we need to celebrate more. I am really proud of the fact that we have a great park system in Newport News. A lot of people don't realize that we have the largest city park, I believe, east of the Mississippi River in our current Newport News City Park in the northern part of our city. We've made a great commitment to the environment here in Newport News. Another thing you don't think about is if somebody asks you, where is one of the largest bald eagle populations on the East Coast, you'd probably think, well, that would be somewhere up in Maine or some rural area and maybe upstate New York. But that's Newport News. We've been able to preserve our environment so well here and have had such a dedication to it that bald eagles who are particularly sensitive to environmental pollution have been able to thrive here in Newport News. And another thing that people don't think about is the seed oyster industry that we have here in Newport News. If you order oysters in a restaurant in most of the United States, those oysters probably started in the Warwick River here in Newport News before they were moved to another location in Chesapeake Bay. And, it's just such an exciting, vibrant, different city. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is you may have seen on the newest census, Newport News is one of the most diverse communities in the entire state of Virginia, and we are the most diverse in Hampton Roads. And I'm just amazed by that because, Newport News has such a unique history that and the problem we have with Newport News is, when I was growing up here, it was very frustrating because we always pretended to be something other than what we were. We wanted to pretend we were a colonial city and like Williamsburg, but that's not who we are. We were a really small village years ago, and we weren't like Williamsburg or Hampton. Our future came when they extended the lines for the railroads and created the largest coal port on the East Coast. And the city grew from there. And the real founder of our city, Collis Huntington. I mean, tell me another southern city that's founded by a Connecticut peddler who goes to the gold fields and makes a fortune in the California gold rush and then gets into railroading and unites the country with a transcontinental railroad and then founds a southern city. Okay. That it was wild. It was crazy. And one of the things that he supported was diversity and inclusion. One of the bequests, one of the things that he mentioned in his will when he passed away was support for Hampton University. So obviously he was there, and he was one of the people who got the railroads extended from Newport News over to Hampton University years ago to unite this area. And, it's been a wild place. We've had great growth. You look at other cities in our Commonwealth that, in the 1870s, 1880s, they were established cities. And in Newport News, you're looking at a population, total population, mind you, of 700 or 800 people. Okay, that's a village, and you compare that to Norfolk or Roanoke or Alexandria. We are a very new city, and everybody who came to Newport News invariably came for the opportunities here, and they came for a new life. You know, a lot of the folks who came from other parts of the country came to start businesses. They came to because of the shipyard. They came because they could do retail here. They came because they could do banking here. And I think that a lot of our African American citizens came because they had greater opportunity in a very diverse city. And again, going back to when I was growing up, we tried to be something we weren't. We tried to deny that we were a diverse city. We tried to segregate and sectionalize. And I think that the more we can return to that original vision of Newport News, of being an exciting, vibrant place of opportunity and opportunity for everyone, I think that's what the world needs right now in the city. And I'm excited about it.
Really great. It felt very optimistic to hear the greatness of Newport News via your viewpoints. I appreciate that. And Councilman Jenkins, I guess that is more or less the meat and potatoes of what I have for you tonight. So I do want to thank you for joining the program. But before you head out, drop all your important ways to be contacted and followed, from websites to social media, so we can learn more about yourself, and then give us some pretty good closing comments.
Okay, I'm not sure how to drop that information, but I will tell you that you can always reach me at my city email address. That is Jenkins, Jenkins, DH @nnva.gov. I do have a Facebook page, Dave Jenkins for City Council, and I have a personal page as well under David Jenkins, and you should be able to find those pretty easily. And of course, you can message me, and of course, my phone number with the city is there on the Newport News City Council page, and you can always reach me through there if other places fail. But stay in touch. Let me know how things are going. As far as closing comments, I'll tell you, I'm probably like a lot of people right now, at least I'd like to think I am, in seeing what's going on in the United States and sometimes in Richmond, and getting this idea that we're all very divided and that to some extent the world is falling apart. I want you to be reassured, though, because when you get to know your neighbors, you're going to find out that it's not, and you're going to go to your job and you're going to keep making a living, and you're going to see improvements, and your kids are going to go to school and get a good education, and you're going to go to your church and church or synagogue or mosque, and you're going to hear about religion and morality. And, you know, things are not that bad. Things have been so much worse in this country than they are right now. We don't have the justification to bring all the hatred and animosity that I'm seeing. And although there has always been some doubt about government, there's always been some question of government. I think that's reasonable and prudent. You also have to have facts, and you also have to listen to experts. And, you know, all of us walk a line, and particularly as elected officials, we always want to listen to experts. We always want to double check the facts. We always want to demand of them their best work. But at some point, you do have to realize that you're maybe not the smartest person about some issues. You know, one of the things I've often said to people is that, you know, one of the troubling things about being an elected official is that quite often I'm the dumbest person in the room when it comes right down to it. And I've got to listen to experts and listen intelligently and discerningly. And you can do that, and you can come to reasonable conclusions. one of the other things that I will also say that comes to mind when I mention that is one of the few things that I really hate about city council work, and I truly love what I do, but nobody warned me for the long meetings where you sit silently. I love to talk to people. I love to hear others and their ideas, and that does get to be a bit trying sometimes.
Well, that's Councilman Dave Jenkins, everybody. Again, thank you, Councilman, for joining us tonight. I do hope you get to enjoy a great Friday evening and a good weekend.
And Conrad, if I could add, I really appreciate your bringing me on this evening. I appreciate the thought you put into your questions, and thank you very much for doing this for our community.
Absolutely, sir. Hopefully we'll catch yourself around the corner sometime in the future, probably before the year runs out.
Sounds great.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, Beach Brothers Show viewers, I want to thank all of you for joining us on our 4th Free Friday. Make sure that you like the Beach Brothers Show on Facebook, and then you also subscribe to it on YouTube. By the way, like Conrad Chesvin for Virginia Beach on Facebook while you're at it. Make sure to look up and join and inquire about the community action team within the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. We can sure use your political fire. The same is true with the Virginia Beach Progressive Caucus. Contact myself and Mike Mescal about joining that to strengthen the progressive fire in our region. So you all be safe tonight. Take care of others and enjoy the night.
It's never too early or too late to plan for retirement. Let me show you how to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your assets from loss due to catastrophic decisions that may affect you the rest of your life. Please call me.
This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money, and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.